So the common hypnosis of our conditioning is what I call me is somehow squeezed into the volume of this body and also the span of a lifetime. It has a birth, it goes through a series of experiences, and then it disappears. So what is born, what is going through these experiences, and what disappears, and where does it go?
So what is born is a form. It's a particular experience of consciousness that's born. So Anoop is a form, right? Deepak is a form. My shoe is a form. Each of us as individuals are forms. And so forms are born, forms are sustained, and forms die. Just like the wave is born from the ocean, the wave sustains for a while, and the wave dies. But in that metaphor, is water ever born? Whether it's an ocean or a wave or the rain falling into the ocean, water was never born. Water takes infinite forms. So similarly, consciousness itself, and this is the big thing in science, is that they conflate mind and consciousness a lot, right? So when we talk about consciousness, many times in science, the interpretation is my personal consciousness, Anoop's mind, the first mind, is taken as consciousness. Well, that's an infinitesimal aspect of what consciousness is. We're defining consciousness as the third mind, as pure potential, as that awareness which, reflecting on itself at different levels, sees the world as different things.
So everything that we think of as form, including our own body, when we look at it very closely, then that form starts to shimmer into a phenomenon, right? It's no longer a form, even scientifically. When you look at this from a scientific perspective, these are particles moving at lightning speeds around huge empty spaces, and those particles themselves, left alone, are waves of possibility, of potential. So even scientifically, this is pure potential appearing as this form, right?
It's very similar language.
A similar language. So every form is a phenomenon. And then we look at the phenomenon, it's the arising and subsiding of activations of consciousness that we call perceptions, sound, touch, sight, taste, smell. And then we interpret them and we call them thoughts. But all the while, it's formless being. All the while, it's formless being. And that formless being is not subject to birth and death. Yeah. It's just the arising and subsiding of phenomena that appear as form. But the form is an illusion. And the phenomenon is happening all the time, in the sense the birth and death is happening all the time.
You know, I was having this conversation with my parents recently.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about death. And
which we have spent a lot of time this last 2 days.
Yeah, it's a fun topic, right? So we were talking about death, but here's what we were saying. We were saying that actually, and this is not to minimize the experience of death. It's a powerful experience. I see death in the emergency department all the time. And it's a powerful experience. But what I think is that death, as we think it exists, does not exist. Death, in terms of the ending of us, doesn't exist. Death as the end of existence doesn't exist. There's no such thing. There is, of course, the ending of form, of course. A form has a beginning and a form has an end. But through the third person, if I look at another person and I say that person has died, all I can really say is that physical body has stopped moving. That's all I can say from a third-person perspective, right? In fact, diagnostically as a physician, what we say is, okay, literally, the heart is no longer moving, and the corneal reflex is no longer moving, and even the functional movements, right? You can look at with functional imaging, the functional movements of the brain are no longer moving. So death is literally diagnosed by the absence of movement. And
of consciousness.
Of consciousness from a third-person perspective, though. The thing is, what is happening from the first-person perspective? None of us know, or we don't remember, right? So forms come and forms go, and we shouldn't minimize death. It can be incredibly traumatic for some people, but I feel like a lot of the trauma, having seen death so many times, is because of this idea that this person is ending. Everything about this person is ending. And I think that's a fallacy. Movement of the body is ending. That particular form and shape of the body will end because the body will slowly disintegrate and it will return to its natural elements. But we cannot say what is happening from the first person perspective.
So, in Advaita Vedanta and all the teachings of the Vedanta, they speak about the 5 kleshas, not knowing true identity, grasping and clinging that which is ungraspable, fear of impermanence, false identity, fear of death. And they're all connected to the first. We not really know the true nature of existence, which is existence, awareness, consciousness, all synonymous, right? Mm-hmm. So once we kind of understand this on an experiential level, experiencing pure consciousness, then we recognize that there is no birth and there is no death. These are human constructs that are created by identifying with form and phenomena given names. Form and phenomena given names.
Yes. Form and phenomena are always in the world of change. Form has to change, whether it's, even if it's a diamond, right? We say diamonds are forever, but they're not forever. A diamond was probably around before my body and it'll probably be around after my body, but it's not going to be there forever, right? It has a birth and it has a death. And then we go from that which seems so hard and seems to span so much time, to something as evanescent as intuition.
What a thought.
Just a thought, just an intuition. It comes and goes like that. Even that changes. And everything in between changes. So this world of change is a world of birth and death. If you look at our body, it's replacing itself all the time. Just the skin. The skin is many layers. There are many layers of skin. There's the epidermis and many layers below that. And the bottom layer, the most basal layer, is ever regenerating. It's being born anew. And by the time that bottom layer makes its way to the top, it's dead. So the entire process of birth, life, and death happens within your skin, within the thickness of your skin. The entire process of birth and death. As we walk off, we're sloughing skin everywhere. It's not just snakes that slough skin, but we don't. It's kind of nasty to think about, right? Fortunately, we don't. It doesn't come off like one big sheath like it does with a snake. It comes off all the time. This constant regenerative process, birth and death.
So let's take that. Okay, what is incarnating as the skin? What is incarnating as the stomach lining that knows how to digest food, or hydrochloric acid, or this skin that knows the difference between pleasure and pain and hot and cold? Would you say it's memory that is incarnating as the appearance of the cells? And where is that memory? Because that's one of the other hard problems of consciousness. People are looking for memory somewhere in a neuron and they can't find it. There's no biological basis for memory, or imagination, or desire, or just any experience. So let's break this down, this whole idea of reincarnation. What reincarnates? Because what we call a person is a process, right? This is what we call Anoop is a process. It was a process as a zygote, as an embryo, as a baby, and this, and 10 years from now. The other day I was with Sanjay Gupta and CNN, and somebody had done a visual of him for the next 50 years, pretending that he, maybe let's say he goes. Actually, show that video. I want you to see this video and then explain how consciousness recycles, or memory recycles, or incarnates at the baby as a what we call a person. So look at this. Now, we could have gone all the way to dusty death, but we didn't want to do that. But that's a process, right? But the sense I am remains in that baby, in that changing process. What is recycling as that process?
I think this to me is the power of consciousness. When we're talking about consciousness as infinity or consciousness as reality or pure potential, is that it appears in so many different forms, and it appears at so many different levels, and it appears differently to different people. So what looks really physical and hard to me, to you might look mental, might look soft, it might look transparent. So we're apparently looking at the same world, but through different lenses, consciousness appears to itself differently. It's like a fun house of mirrors, right? It's like I look here, which reflection am I seeing? Because there's so many reflections going back and forth. So similarly, consciousness shows itself at different levels in different ways. So if we look at it through the scientific lens, then we talk about genes, right? We talk about phenotypes. We talk about interpretation of those genes and how they appear as a physical body. But then we go back to the initial question that Deepak asked, which is, then what are those genes? When we say gene, what do we mean, right? A gene is something inherited that gets passed from one biological organism to the other. So it is a form of memory. If we're talking about consciousness, consciousness in a particular form, Rupert Sheldrake called it the morphogenetic field, right? It's a type of consciousness that retains memory. It retains something of that form that it held. And when that morphogenetic field passes on, whatever forms within it, whatever aspect of consciousness comes within it, takes that form again. So we can look at it through the scientific lens. We'll say, well, the answer is easy. It's genes, right? It's genes that become that. It's the blastula, which then divides into multiple cells and differentiates into multiple cell lines, white blood cells and red blood cells, and bone and muscle. And
all coming from one stem cell.
From one cell, and then neurological tissue, right? It differentiates into all this. Well, what is that? It's a differentiation of consciousness. These are all symbolic of a differentiation of consciousness. So call it a gene, call it a morphogenetic field, but there's no escaping the fact that these are constructs of aspects of consciousness that happen to be staying the same, and therefore we see it being filled in by a familiar body that seems to age.
So let's, this is very good because we can connect this to what is called karma, sanskara, vasana. A baby is born and maybe it has an identical twin, right? The same DNA, exactly. It was the one fertilized egg that suddenly decided to become two identical twins. And yet, even as babies, they have different personalities. What is the source of that personality, even before the conditioning starts?
I feel like we're asking different questions that always comes back to consciousness.
That's okay.
I don't want to give a boring answer, but that's what I see. Like when we ask what any of these are, I feel like Deepak Ji said it well, that we're talking about constructs. We're talking about constructs of consciousness. Fundamentally, there is potential, and we can interpret that through a scientific mind one way, through a philosophical mind one way, through a religious mind one way, through a rational mind one way, through a playful mind one way, through an artistic mind one way, musical mind one way, and that's what we see. We see this entire tapestry before us.
Can consciousness remain as pure potential, or by its very nature it has to differentiate into me, you, and this world?
I would say consciousness alone is, even now. Even as we're seeing a world of multiplicity, that is because we're looking at the forms. Attention is on the forms. And that's what meditation is, right? What happens in meditation? We become aware of something that feels like oneness. We become aware that in and beyond the multiplicity, there is some fundamental unity. That's what meditation is. It's going to a deeper level of the mind. At the surface level of a mind, there is separation, there's discontinuity, there are different things. At a deeper level, there are just a few. At a deeper level beyond that, there's oneness, right? The one and the many are one. So I wouldn't say that consciousness has to become anything. It's just when we, through our minds, look at it a particular way, it appears a particular way. But just like whether we're talking about ocean or rain, we're talking about water alone, and there's nothing other than water. Similarly, when we're talking about the world, or people, or genes, or forms, or aging, we're still talking about consciousness.
Okay, since we use words, we have to use constructs, but for the sake of completion, can you differentiate between Jiva, Atma, Brahman, ego, mind, intellect, as the maps do, right?
Yeah.
So explain that to people.
So Jiva is the sense of individuality, right? So I would say it's something like the first mind. When I feel like I'm an individual, and I feel like I'm localized to this particular place, I'm here and I'm not there, that sense of individuality is what we call the Jiva. Okay? And then Brahman, on the other hand, is considered the ultimate. It's the infinite. All right? So that would be something like third mind. That which always is, but takes itself or appears through the mind to be limited. So this individual self, like we said, it is nothing other than the infinite. That was our premise, that infinity alone exists. And when it takes itself through a particular lens, because it's infinite, it can take itself as anything. When it takes itself through a lens, it appears finite, which is me, which is Anoop, which is each of us as an individual. So this is what we call, it's like mutual superimposition, right? The infinite seems to be superimposed into the finite, and yet the finite is superimposed on the infinite. And depending on which lens we look through it, we can see it in two different ways. But it doesn't mean that they're actually two different things. And that's the meaning, of course, of Tattvamasi, is that thou art, meaning that the infinite is the individual, right? Mathematically, it's inconsistent. How can the individual be the infinite? How can a single be infinite? Well, because we have to look beyond that sense of identity and see what appears as that is infinity.
So when there's a cremation in India, very frequently the Bhagavad Gita is cited, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, weapons cannot shatter it, fire cannot burn it, who you are is unborn, is not subject to death. It's imperishable, indestructible. What is perishable is not real. Only the imperishable is real. Well, intellectually we are beginning to get there. How does this relate to our experiences of love or joy or loss of the fear of death or what we are always seeking, in a sense, is unity with this consciousness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does this relate? What is love?
To me, love is when we see sameness within difference. So if I look at a person, of course I can see that this is my body, that's the other person's body, but there is something that's fundamental that is appearing as both me and what appears to be another person. And that, what we might call oneness, is there. Beyond the multiplicity, there's that oneness. So when both of these are juxtaposed, to me, that's a feeling of love. Right? If it's just difference, then it's fear. Right? Then it's competition, then it's unsureness, uncertainty, if it's just difference. If it's just sameness, it's non-dual. It's pure limitlessness, right? But that feeling of love, that creative tension of love, that beauty of love, that pulsation of love happens because there's some polarity. There's non-difference within difference, there's difference within non-difference. And there's something beautiful there that feels like love.
Tagore, Indian poet Tagore used to say, when you see yourself in another person, that's love. And when you see yourself in an object, that's beauty. And beauty, love, satyam, shivam, sundaram. So beauty, love, and joy, and awareness are essentially different aspects of qualia.
Yeah.
Qualia of the same experience.
Yeah, they're to me, they kind of feel like shades of the same thing. It's like if you look at a sphere, you look at it from one side, the shading is a little bit different. You look at it from other side, it's still a sphere. It still looks the same from all angles, but it's just maybe the shading is a little bit different. That's like joy, love. It's
Are they
different
entangled?
feelings. Yeah, they're absolutely. The whole world is entangled because it's
Sensations, images, feelings, thoughts,
Absolutely.
all entangled. Given constructs, we call them mind, body, and universe.
Absolutely. There is only consciousness.
So the world is made out of consciousness.
The world is made out of. In fact, that's
The
what I tried
body
to say.
is made out of consciousness. The brain is made out of consciousness. This microphone is made out of consciousness. All this is made out of consciousness. Meaning it's a modified experience of consciousness in itself.
Yes.
Consciousness knows itself as this, all this, but also the experiences of the other sentient beings that biology calls biological organisms, whether it's a snake or a dolphin. So consciousness is all modes of knowing, all experiences in every sentient being. There's a painting we have at our house of this god in the Tibetan mythology, Rahul. And he has eyes in his fingernails, in his hair follicles, and his genitalia. So is the infinite looking at itself through all these different modes of knowing and experience, just through its own self-interaction.
Absolutely. It's called pure knowing or pure intelligence, right? Not intelligence of something, not something we measure on an IQ test or even an EQ test, but pure intelligence, pure knowing, which reflects on itself. I always kind of envision it like a kaleidoscope, right? And each of those bits in that kaleidoscope are like fragments of the mind, like a different species of mind, a different person's mind, first mind, second, whatever you want to say. These are all like reflections. They cause the reflection of that light of knowing. It reflects in all kinds of shapes and all kinds of colors. And then we give names to each one of those, and we communicate using those names.
So first there's a sensation, which is evanescent, which is almost ephemeral, almost dreamlike. We give it a name, we reify it, and create the notion of an objective world.
Yes. And that subject-object relationship we talked about before, to come to that, even to come to the ability to give that name, this mind has to make this movement where it says, that's you and this is me. Or that is over there and this is over here. Right? Without that fundamental duality, then on that duality, on that foundation, it's like this stage, right? There's a foundation here, and on top of that is this carpet. And then we have the sofas, and then we have us sitting here. But so similarly, consciousness itself, it fundamentally has to move into this subject-object orientation. It has to make you and I, or this or that, all of this possible. Once we do that, then I can say, oh, okay, I, Anoop, see a table, and I've given it a name. Or, a group, a civilization comes along and says, this will be called table. This will be called hand. But that is all possible only because of that initial movement of the mind. So once consciousness sets up this field, this three-dimensional field, this geometric field, then on top of that we overlay our constructs and our colors, and then we kind of create the story out of it.
But at the heart of all this, we are timeless beings, immortal beings.
Absolutely, because consciousness is not born. So it's not the loss. We in philosophy we talk about the loss of fear of death, right? It's not because I'm not going to die. It's because I was never born. Is a key difference. It's not that I will live forever. It's that no, what I took to be me is not what I am. What was born is a form of me, and that form will die. And the reason I am eternal is not because I'll never die, but I
am not in time altogether.
Was never in time.
Was never in time altogether. So timeless doesn't mean stretching endlessly in time, because that would be very difficult to imagine, right? It's unimaginable. Timeless literally means not in time altogether, which is where cosmology is going right now. That space-time, energy, information, matter are emergent properties of something much more fundamental, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Right? Right. So that hymn of Shankaracharya, Do you know it? The one,
I don't know the whole thing, but
you know a little bit of it?
I know a little bit of it.
Sing it. I'll explain it. Or you can explain it.
No, you can explain.
No, you know.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, okay.
You can rap a little bit. I hope I get it right. I wasn't planning on singing this. Actually, my wife told me, she said, you should sing at the end.
There you are.
She said, you're a singer, that's what you do, like, you should sing.
Okay, actually, sing it, and I'll find a Sanskrit version too with the titles in English. But let's have a prelude from you.
So I can translate the first verse. I remember that one. Asangoham, 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 punah punaha, satchidanandarupoham, ahameva hamavyayaha. So asangoham, sangha is an attachment. Asangaha means unattached. So asango aham, unattached I am. And he says asangoham, asangoham, asangoham punah punaha, unattached am I, unattached am I, unattached am I again and again, and again and again and again. So this is kind of like unattached meaning, doesn't mean detached from the world, doesn't mean disengaged from the world. It means independent of these forms I am. It's not about, being an ascetic and going off to the forest. All right? That can be done or it can be not done.
It's to be engaged and detached at the same time.
Exactly. It's seeing through the form. It's not being attached to the form. It's not that we have to throw it away. It's not that we can't use it. It's not that we can't enjoy it. But unattached am I. I'm enjoying it, and yet I see through it. This is not what I am. Unattached am I again and again.
So, Renee, can you find the other hymn, since he's already sung this one? The one, I'm Pure Consciousness. We played that in Silent Awakenings.
So the next line is Satchidananda Rupoham. So Sat,
that's it.
Ananda, which is existence, Sat. Chit is knowledge or consciousness or awareness. Ananda is bliss. Ananda is an interesting word, Ananda is often translated as bliss. It comes from the Sanskrit Ananda. But if you look at Ananda, it's Ananta. Anta means end. Anta means the end or the culmination of. Ananta means unending. So limitlessness is to me like the true translation of Ananda. Like Ananda is pure limitlessness, absolute limitlessness, which through the subtle mind feels like bliss, right? So Sat Chit Ananda, this existence, this knowledge, this limitlessness, it is of that form. Rupoham means of
Shivoham.
Oh, that's another beautiful one.
So we're going to play it for them. And with the translation, if you will.
Shivoham, Shivoham. Is that the one?
Yeah.
Satchitanandoham, Shivoham, Shivoham, Satchitanandoham. Shiv, auspiciousness am I, auspiciousness am I.
So the word Shiva also means pure consciousness. Okay. Source of all potentiality. Renee, do you know what I'm talking about? I'm not the elements, I'm not the ego, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm pure consciousness. Do you have the translation? You want to translate as she's singing?
I don't know that much Sanskrit.
I am not the elements. I'm not the forces. I'm not the mind. I'm not the ego. I'm not the earth. I'm not the wind. I'm not the sky. I'm without form. I'm Shivoham. I'm the formless field of all possibilities. Chidananda Rupam Shivoham Shivoham.
I used to hear this in the mornings. My mom used to play this in middle school.
I'm not the five elements. I'm not the tissues, the vata, the pitta, the kapha. I'm none of that. I'm beyond all the elements and forces. I am pure consciousness. Chidanand. Chidanand means blissful consciousness taking form. I'm beyond all opposites. I'm beyond freedom, I'm beyond karma, beyond bondage. I'm pure consciousness. Beyond sin, beyond virtue, beyond pleasure, beyond pain, beyond all the mantras, all the techniques. Because all techniques, mantras generated in consciousness, right? Okay. No death, no birth, all the things we've been talking about in one hymn. Take us through a short meditation before we finish.
So I'll just ask you to start with your eyes open. We'll do this a little differently. Right? Consciousness alone is. So eyes open, eyes closed. It's the same. So just some easy and full breaths. And just settle into that state of relaxation. And keep your body any way you want to keep it. I'm going to make this a no rules meditation. So if you want to sit on the ground, if you want to lie down, however you want to do it. This is not about the body, this is not about the mind. Easy and full breaths. And just notice the presence of that stillness, even with the eyes open. The existence of form in no way is a bar to stillness. So just relax into that stillness, even with the eyes open. Sensations come and they go. Sounds come, sounds go. With every breath, just sink a little deeper into that silence. That silence which is beyond the form. Even if forms are being registered. Easy and full breaths, sinking ever deeper. So the forms are still there, but they're more subtle now than when we started. Notice any feeling of awkwardness of us having our eyes open. And just notice the awkwardness. Notice any sense of how meditation is supposed to be. And keep sinking deeper and deeper. Now gently and slowly let the eyelids fall closed. And as you do, notice that the silence is the same. The awareness is the same, only appearing differently when the eyes are open. Relax into your infinite nature. Breath by breath. If there's any tension in the body, just bring the awareness to that. And breathe and release. No strain, no effort. You don't have to do anything. You are already infinite. Sinking even deeper. The world of forms does not contradict this experience in any way. This experience differentiates into the world of forms. Recognize your infinite nature beneath the costume. Easy, full breaths, sinking ever deeper. Any sense of limitation is dissolving. We are all converging in the same place. All forms, all sounds, all sensations are aspects of this, and therefore they cannot contradict this in any way. Notice tension. Notice the desire to move. Notice slight pains. None of it contradicts your infinite nature. There are no contradictions. Now very slowly, just open the eyelids halfway. Just halfway. So some light streams in. This does not contradict your infinite nature in any way. Light and dark are a part of you. Form and formless are a part of you. Open the eyes a little bit more. Infinity alone exists. The eyes are almost fully open, not fully open. We are still in that infinite awareness. And now open the eyes fully. And nothing has changed still. Infinite awareness still is the case, though it may appear differently.
Thank you, Anoop. Thank you.